Hello everyone. Today we are going to explore J.M. Keynes' groundbreaking theory of demand for money or Keynesian liquidity preference theory of interest. John Maynard Keynes or J.M. Keynes was the most famous economist in the early 20th century and known to be the father of modern macroeconomics. His book, General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, is a masterpiece work that revolutionized economic thoughts. He challenged the prevailing classical economic theories during Great Depression in 1930s and advocated for government intervention to stabilize the economy and combat unemployment. He also introduced the concept of liquidity preference to explain why people hold money beyond just transaction. Here we are going to discuss the liquidity preference theory and concepts proposed by Keynes through this theory. Okay. Before beginning the discussion, let us briefly review some earlier theories of money demand. Before Keynes, classical economists explained money demand using quantity theory of money and believed money as a medium of exchange for transaction purposes. Many quantity theory of money versions came, but most popular version of the theory was outlined by Irving Fisher through equation of exchange in his book Purchasing Power of Money. His famous equation is MV is equal to PT. Here MV represent money demand, money supply side, and PT represent money demand side. So for classicals, this here money supply is equal to money demand. Here M represent money supply, V represent velocity of money, P represent price level, and T is transactions. Here classical economists formed a direct relationship between money supply and price level. In MV is equal to PT, this V and T are stable and can derive a direct relationship between money supply and price level. But later, the Cambridge economists or neoclassical economists, including Alfred Marshall, introduced a refined version that considered money demand as a proportion of income. So here, focus shifted to money demand. Their equation is MD is equal to KPY. For neoclassical economists too, money supply is equal to money demand. So we can rewritten this equation as MS is equal to KPY. Here this K, which is the proportion of income for transaction purposes, and Y, the real income, are constant. We can say MS by KY is equal to P. So money supply by KY is equal to P. This Cambridge version 2 derived a positive link between money supply and price level. But Keynes argued that this was incomplete and introduced a new approach emphasized on liquidity preference. That is Keynesian theory of demand for money or liquidity preference theory of interest. So what is liquidity preference? Liquidity preference means tendency of people to hold money in original form or tendency of people to hold money as liquid. Tendency to keep money in liquid form. Money in liquid form. That is liquidity preference theory. For example, we can say demand for dollar, pound, Indian rupee over bonds, equities, etc. So when a person choose money over these portfolios, we can say it is as liquid money. So dollar, pound, Indian rupee, or Sri Lankan rupee, or any other currencies, we can say it as liquid cash. So, people, according to Keynes, people like to keep money as liquid or liquid money. People like to keep the liquid money, and there should be an incentive given for parting away from liquidity. So, people should, in order to parting away from liquidity, there should be an incentive, and interest is defined as the reward for parting away from liquidity. He connected interest rate, or he included interest rate into the demand for money. This is the major departure from the last theory. Even though this Keynes challenged the theories or Keynesian theories, quantity theories, still he agreed with earlier view that people need money for transaction purposes. He agreed with classicals that people need money for transaction. Okay, but he also argued that money demand is influenced by the interest rate, which leads to speculative motive. Money demand is also depend upon interest rate. So this transaction demand is based upon income, and this speculative demand, that is this money demand depend upon interest rate, leads to a new revolutionary idea, that is speculative motive. So it is a new idea introduced by the Keynes in demand for money. Here we can say that he agreed that people need money for transaction purposes, which is based upon income, and also the money demand is also depend upon interest rate, which can be explained with the help of speculative motive. So we are going to study this Keynesian demand for money, which based upon income and interest rate, and he also introduced three motives to holding money. Here I said only transaction motive, but there is an addition motive too, that is precautionary motive, and he introduced this transaction motive, precautionary motive, and speculative motive to holding money. Sorry. Here, so these are the three motives of demand for money: transaction motive, precautionary motive, and speculative motive. Transaction motive is the first reason for preferring liquidity. Here, it can be defined as demand for money for daily activities or day-to-day expenses. It is the function of income. And for example, we can use family, that is, family needs money for buying groceries, paying bills, paying rent, etc. And also a shopkeeper needs cash on hand to give change to customers and purchase inventories. So family and business ventures need money for day-to-day transactions, and we can include that demand of money as transaction demand for money. The second reason for demand for money or liquidity preference is precautionary motive. It means holding money for unexpected expenses or emergencies. Unexpected expenses or emergencies. Here, for example, family kept aside money for medical emergencies. Okay, that is medical emergencies. We know our family hold a particular amount of cash for some unexpected events. For mostly it's for medical emergencies or some uh, unexpected uh, expenses, like if we have some unexpected tax events occurs, or tax returns occurs, or any other purchases, or any activities, unexpected activities, we hold some money for that. Okay. Some companies also keep extra funds in case of supply chain disruptions or economic downturn. So families and business ventures both keep an extra money to compensate the emergencies, and it can be included as precautionary demand for money or motive. That is, it can be represented by precautionary motive. It is also a function of income. This both transaction demand for money and precautionary demand for money are the direct functions of income. We can see that as income increases, we need more money because we will buy more groceries, we will move to a better house, our bills also increases. So as income increases, transaction motive or transaction demand for money increases. Like that, income and precautionary demand for money are also positively related. As income increases, we hold more money, or we will kept aside more money for unexpected expenses. So this both demand for money, are this both motives are directly related to the income. Now we come to the most important part, that is speculative motive. It is the most interesting and unique aspect of Keynesian theory. It refers to holding money to take advantage of future investment opportunities, or it represents people's desire to hold money or liquidity as an alternative to investing in bond for future investment opportunities. Okay, people desire, or people like to hold money for taking investment opportunities in future, or as an alternative to investing in bonds. That is a speculative demand for money. I would like to keep money in my hands. I like liquidity because this money will used for investment purposes in the future, or if I get a better investment opportunity, I will use this money in the that opportunity, that investment opportunity. So now I will keep the money. If I keep a money, so we can say if I keep money for better investment opportunities, I can say speculative demand for money is very high. But instead of liquidity, if I invest that money, I can say my speculative demand for money is very low. So this money demand, the speculative demand money, the speculative demand for money depends on interest rate, but it is inversely proportional to rate of interest. We know that rate of interest is an incentive to parting away from liquidity, is an incentive or a reward. Incentive or reward. If interest rate is high, holding cost of money is very high. So instead of liquidity, we will prefer investment in bonds. Here, speculative demand for money. Now, as interest rate is very high, holding cost of money is very high. So I prefer to invest in bonds. So my speculative demand for money, or MTS, is very low. I think you got that. If you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments. So speculative demand for money means people's desire to hold money as an alternative to investing in bonds for taking future investment opportunities. Here we can say this relation is as interest rate increases, bond price will decrease, and people like to invest, speculative demand also decreases. So we can say there is an inverse relationship between interest rate and speculative demand for money, and also there is an inverse relationship between interest rate and bond price. So we can explain this with the help of an example. Here we can see bond price, that is rupees 1000. interest rate is 5% and interest we earn is rupees 50. So it is the first phase. Here we can see that interest rate is comparatively low. So we know that as interest rate is very low, we are less willing to invest money because interest rate is very low, holding cost is low also. So speculative demand for money is high. So people like to keep liquidity because they think interest rate will rise in the future. Same thing happened. The second phase, interest rate increased to 10%. So now, in order to get a interest of rupees 50, bond price, I have to invest in a bond price of rupees 500. Previously, for getting an interest of rupees 50, I have to invest in 1000 rupees. Now, to get an interest of 50, not interest rate, interest of 50, I have to invest only in 500 rupees. Now, interest rate increased to 10 percentage, bond price reduced to 500. Now holding cost of money increases. That can be represented here. In previous first phase, for 500 rupees, interest is only 25 because interest rate is 5%, interest is 25. But now in the second phase, for 500 rupees, the interest become 50 because interest rate increased to 10%. So holding cost of the money increased. So now I would like to invest money in bonds instead of keeping it. Here speculation, so as holding cost of money increases, speculative demand, people's desire to hold money for investment purposes. So people's desire to hold money instead of investment decreases. So here as interest rate increases to 10%, now I need to only invest in 500 rupees to get a interest of 50. So interest rate increased to 10%, bond price reduced to 500, and here holding cost of money increased, speculative demand for money reduced. So I invest in bonds instead of keeping liquidity. So holding cost of money increased and money demand, speculative demand decreases. In this way, this relation is working. This curve represents Keynesian money demand based on income, and the second graph represents Keynesian money demand based on interest rate. In the first graph, Keynes lumped together transaction demand for money and precautionary demand for money under M1. We know both these demand for money are the direct function of income. Here it represented M1 is equal to L1Y. This graph here in x-axis, it is transaction and precautionary demand for money. In y-axis, it is interest rate. As income, we know it is insensitive to interest rate. So interest rate have no influence on this transaction and precautionary demand for money. So as income increases externally, the money demand also increases. As income increased from y1 to y2 and y2 to y3, money demand also increases from m1 to m2 and m2 to m3. The second graph represents speculative demand for money, which is the function, inverse function of rate of interest. Inverse function of rate of interest. Here at over3, rate of interest become very high, or it become the highest. Interest rate become highest. As interest rate is very high, here holding cost of money is also high. So demand for money for speculative purposes is zero. So now I would like to invest all money in bonds because interest rate is very high. So holding cost is very high. So speculative demand for money is zero. As the interest rate reduced to over2, demand for money increases to OM1. Here some people think as interest rate reduces, holding cost of money reduces. So some people think liquidity is more preferable. So demand for money increases to OM1. And when the interest rate reduced to over star to this level, people no more willing to invest and hold money with them, and there is no demand for bonds. At this point, speculative demand for money become very high. Or it is the point, or it is the interest rate. O master is the interest rate where people expect that it will not fall below the level and hold money to take advantage of interest rate that will rise in the future. In this point, people think that it is the lowest interest rate. This interest rate will not fall below. So now it is the lowest interest rate. We know that as interest rate is very low, bond price is very high. So they think in the future, in the near future, there's a chance for interest rate to increase. So they will keep the money, liquid money for speculative purposes. They will keep the liquid money. Bond price is very high, so keep the liquid money because holding cost of money is minimum now. So they keep liquid money. And this point and this overstar interest rate. So as the holding cost of money is very low, the demand for money become perfectly elastic. At this point, at the lowest rate of interest, demand for money become perfectly elastic and this region is known as liquidity trap. This is one of the important concept in demand theory of Keynes, that is liquidity trap. The lowest rate of interest, demand for money become perfectly elastic and that region is called a liquidity trap. And at this point, monetary policy become ineffective and Keynes Keynes introduced government, or Keynes proposed or recommended for government intervention to boost economy. Intervention to boost economy. So at this point, monetary policy become ineffective and Keynes proposed for government intervention or fiscal policies to boost the economy. This is the two demand curves, that is demand curve based on income and interest rate is given here. This curve represents total demand for money based on Keynesian liquidity preference theory. It formed by combining the transaction demand, precautionary demand and speculative demand for money. Is represent another important concept in Keynesian demand theory, that is interest rate determination. Here interest rate is determined at the level where demand for money equals supply of money. In the figure, this QM curve, which is a vertical curve, it represents money supply and this L curve represents money demand. Here money supply is vertical because money supply is determined externally by agencies. Here money supply is constant. And this both money supply curve and money demand curve intersect at the point E2 where equilibrium rate of interest is established. Here at the point E, equilibrium rate of interest is established. Here money supply is equal to money demand. Here both the curves intersect at the point E and here money supply is equal to money demand. And if there any deviation from this equilibrium position occurs, adjustment will take place through the rate of interest and equilibrium E2 will be re-established. Here at the point here, in this point, money supply is greater than money demand. This graph, we can see the difference here. And as money supply is greater than money demand, interest rate falls, holding cost of money reduces, people prefer liquidity or speculative demand for money increases because holding cost of money reduces, so people like to keep the cash or speculative demand for money increases. But at this point, money demand is greater than money supply. So interest rate rise, holding cost of money also increases, speculative demand for money decreases. Holding cost of money increases, so people like to invest in bonds and they use money for investment, so speculative demand for money reduces. Okay, I think you got the idea here. Now we come to the last section of this discussion. Let us summarize the main points. The first point is transaction demand for money, and second one is precautionary demand for money, which are the positive function of income, and it is insensitive to change in the rate of interest. The third motive of money demand is speculative motive. It is an inverse function of rate of interest. Here, bond prices are also inversely related to the rate of interest. At critically low rate of interest, people expect that the rate of interest will not fall further and the demand for money become perfectly elastic and known as the liquidity trap, and that region is known as the liquidity trap. Now we come to the conclusion part of the class. Keynesian liquidity preference theory remains highly relevant even in modern macroeconomics and had an important role in shaping government policies during the time of economic crisis and helped government to plan decisions for the financial stability. I think you got the idea of Keynesian liquidity preference theory through this class. If you have any doubts, like I said before, you can ask in the comment section, and if you need some topic specifically, you can ask it too. Thank you for your participation. Bye. See you in the next class. Please subscribe my channel. Okay.